Okay, I see that. That started. I'll share my screen. I've got the PowerPoint for today, which is November 6th. This is our third meeting of the Funding and Cost Sharing Working Group. I'll go on to the agenda. And Paul, I think you've been the designated one to go through this.
Yeah, I think I have. So, good afternoon, everybody. As Dom said, this is the third meeting of the Funding and Cost Sharing Working Group of the Public Safety Communications Task Force. Today is Thursday, November 6th. Just a reminder, the meeting is being recorded, and that recording will be made available on the task force's website shortly thereafter the meeting. And I see I guess we'll start with a roll call. Members of the working group are myself, co-chair Dan Batesy,
Here.
and Mike Dunges.
Hello.
See him. Hi, Mike. And also with us are Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate. And I see Chris Pedotti from Department of Public Safety. And I don't see anybody else. We have the agenda on our screen. Are there any changes needed to that agenda? If not, we'll consider that accepted and move on to approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion about those minutes before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the last meeting, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, you guys have it. Minutes are approved. And we can move on to the meat of the meeting. Turn it back to you, Don.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Jumping right into the objectives for this group, or this working group is trying to develop recommendations and preliminary priorities for public safety funding and cost sharing for the task force. You'll see some specific items there taken from Act 78 with regards to requirements that they are expecting from the task force, and therefore the working group trying to provide recommendations in each of these areas. A couple of them highlighted. Rick, any details on those, or I think we discussed these last week.
Yeah, I think we're good on these.
Okay.
I think these will fit into the formula for cost sharing that we'll get a chance to talk about.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think you can go to slide 7.
Yeah, we discussed the process. We've gone through the previous meetings. Slide 7 is an update on the action items. The first, let's see. The first 3 were closed previously. 4 was action item for Televate to update the PSAT budget spreadsheet that had been developed with incident numbers. That has been done, and we'll show that in our call today. Action item 5 was to Televate to identify the senators that are responsible for each of the dispatch centers that had not provided budget information during the data gathering process. And I believe those have been identified as well. So we'll review that also. Action item 6 is for working group members to contact those centers based on the information that we've identified and those that have not provided funding information yet. That is ongoing. Any additional questions or input on the actions? Okay, following up on action item number 4, and let me go into presentation mode here. Okay, sorry, there it goes. Okay. Can everybody see that spreadsheet?
Looks good.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks. You'll see the column almost all the way to the right. Incident column has been added. So this lists the incidents for each of those either PSAPs or dispatch centers that was provided through the inventory report that was submitted by MCP. Most of those have been provided. There's a few that were not available at that time, but most of the incidents numbers have been provided. We'll see. Let's see. The highest one there is Williston at over 70,000, but they range anywhere from a low of less than 1,000 for a couple of them to over 70,000.
And I'm sorry if we covered this before, but do we know those incident numbers? Do we know? But for example, if you have an incident that involves all three, police, fire, and EMS, is that one incident or three incidents? Do we know?
I'm not 100% sure, Paul. We'll need to look into that to make sure. I did notice that the numbers that are provided in the inventory report have the total incidents broken down by those three disciplines.
Okay. And it may not even be relevant. I mean, because
Yeah, I'm not sure if they count them multiple since they are adding up for the three public safety disciplines. I'm not sure if they count them more than once. We can take the action to look into that and confirm.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
it
maybe.
may not be relevant. I mean, it's because if an incident like that may take three times the amount of time to deal with, so it may be
Right.
appropriate to count it three times.
Right.
However, it might be relevant, and maybe Chris could provide insight. I mean, some of these numbers are coming from two of his centers.
Oh, can you hear me, Rick?
Yes. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, are we talking about, I mean, time factor wise, it definitely is relevant in a sense of, every time you're having to, transfer calls or this or that, obviously that's going to add up to it. But if you're talking about statistics, not so sure necessarily, because I mean, everything is kind of compounded under one incident, if you will, but there's several steps within that one incident, if that makes sense.
That makes sense because you could have to call three different centers because they could be dispatched by three different entities.
Right. Yeah. So really it's kind of like, you think of things as being like an incident number, for example. There could be a lot of steps within that single incident. So it can be deceiving to say it's one particular incident. And to the point of like statistics, this is just kind of like an FYI. So we're in the process of updating our phone system to a VoIP system, et cetera. And so like to date, we have had very limited access to legitimate statistics when it comes to call volume, for example. I'm talking about on a 7-digit line, et cetera. So a lot of it has been, kind of haphazard and more so guesstimations, if you will. So it has been difficult thus far. And again, maybe that's getting a little bit off the topic, but just to give you an idea, it's hard to even come up with those statistics. When we were filling out some of these things for MCP, we had to do a lot of guessing, when it came to certain statistics. But again, to your original point, yes, some calls, just because it's under one particular incident, it could involve several different steps and be a lot more time consuming. And I think that typically is what we see, especially down in Westminster, because they have a lot more fire and EMS agencies that we also dispatch for. So I hope that helped, but I realize it was probably a lot of babble as well.
That's all right. It's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to take those incident numbers just as for what they're worth. And I think some of them are estimates. Like if you look at Bennington, Brattleboro, and Grafton County, New Hampshire, that would suggest they're taking a stab at the number of calls, not actual numbers. So I think just bear in mind that they're not ironclad.
Yeah, agreed.
And one question I have, when we describe them as incidents, I know I asked this before, but does this include the calls for I need a copy of my accident report, or I want to, I have a question, like so more routine, non-emergent stuff? Or is this just emergency incidents?
I'm under the impression these are emergency incidents, but we should
Right,
take action
right.
on them to check that out too. I'm pretty sure the report says emergency incidents.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think that they're calls that resulted in somebody being dispatched.
Okay.
Not
Right.
just, a crime victim. I want to talk to Trooper Smith to get
Yeah, I
follow
need a
up on my
copy of
burglary.
my police report, or stuff like that. That's
Right.
that's what I was curious about.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, moving forward. Okay, here are the dispatch centers that did not provide their budget, and the senator within that region. You can
We had
see
also
multiple.
spoken last time about identifying a police chief, because Paul might know them, or Dan, but we didn't. Our request was to identify the senators, but we could also add the police chiefs if that's beneficial.
Yeah, I don't think we need you to do that.
Okay. And because some of these areas, I mean, like Burlington covers multiple senators, and same with other larger jurisdictions.
So Paul, do you feel like we need more time on the outreach front, or do you think we should kick an email to the senators and ask them for a lift?
I'm afraid I just didn't get it done since last week for what
That's all right.
was planning. I had volunteered to do. So I think if we could, I would hate to, I don't know, maybe I
You'd
just
hate to
feel
stir up trouble if we didn't need to. Is that what
I
you're
do.
saying?
I've hate to stir up trouble, and I also don't have a lot of confidence that some of these senators would be of any use to us for what we're
Yeah.
thinking about contacting them for.
I think there's potential political suicide to go to a senator to ask a chief for it. I don't think that's the right approach either.
Well, I'm not. I being the politician on the call, I'm not actually really good at this from a politics standpoint. So don't take my advice.
I mean, I think it really is case by case. If you had a personal relationship with one of these senators and felt like you could go to them and that they would go not too heavy-handedly to the community and ask for the information, that's one thing. But to just blanket say we're going to reach out to all these senators and ask them to reach out to the communities under their constituency, I'm hesitant to do that.
Agreed.
Cool. All right.
Okay, any other comments or ready to move on?
Yes. Let's go to slide. Before we go there, I was looking at maybe it might make sense to look at the larger jurisdictions out of that list. I don't know if it may two questions.
You mean back here?
Yes. Do we go after the larger jurisdictions, or do we punt on it? Because, obviously there's some variation there of what, Burlington obviously is our largest population center, and they may or may not want to share their information. Woodstock is a much smaller area. So we go from Woodstock of 3,008 population, and Burlington 48,000. I looked at this earlier. So, and of course, St. Michael Rescue, they're very limited. They do a very little bit. Mad River, I don't think those two are worth chasing after.
Yeah,
There were some that provided incident numbers, even if there wasn't cost numbers. So if we go back here, yeah, for example, Burlington had a sizable number of incidents, right, over 35,000 here. So yeah, um, yeah, agree with what you said there, Rick. Obviously, Burlington and South Burlington had a larger number of incidents.
Right.
yeah, if you can go back to that other list, to the one with the senators on it for a minute. I'm pretty confident that with some outreach, I can get at least some basic budget numbers from most of those. Mad River Ambulance and St. Michael's Rescue, I wouldn't necessarily waste any time on,
Mhm.
because they're so small and they only take care of themselves. And all the rest of those, I think I know either the chief or the number 2 person at all of those departments. So I'm pretty confident we can get something from them.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. 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 You want to
Now
address
let's
this
go
next,
go
Rick,
to
or somewhere else?
slide 23.
Okay. All right. I guess easiest thing will be for me to just scroll through. Sorry for the flashing here. Okay, slide 23, the
That's the
budget.
one.
All
That's
right.
the one. Okay, so as I shared with you the actual spreadsheet, and since our last meeting, I went ahead and completed all the cells. So every cell in the spreadsheet, if you put a number in there, it will auto calculate sums, totals, remaining balance. And I tried to put a large, a thicker line between, upfront investment and post year one investment. So I've also added a few additional comments, and I just wanted to I know we spoke about this in our last chairs meeting, and expect that we'll probably do that again on this coming Monday. But this spreadsheet now is comprehensive in that wherever we add a number, change a number, it's going to auto sum, and it's flexible if we want to add more to it, but not much other than that. I may have put in a few more comments, and also, I mean, this phone system that Chris mentioned earlier. I recall that was another upgrade for Williston and Westminster that I don't know if it's required at other PSAPs, but that wasn't on. We didn't have that on our list about the phone system. If that becomes of interest, but also Barb, during a task force meeting, Barb had talked about having a meeting with the health, I guess the Health and Human Services group, about adding in an electronic forms, and we went through that budget. What Barb E911 had received a proposal that was well over $200,000, and that didn't cover everything. And I don't know if we're going to add that to the CAD or not, but if we decide we want to do that, we could, we'll just upgrade the CAD numbers. Anyway, I don't know if you have any questions about this, but this is just a more robust spreadsheet now.
I think there was some discussion last time as to whether or not we want to, well, I guess first question is, would this be do we foresee this as one of the, or part of the deliverable that this working group provides to the task force? And would this, and I could see this as potentially being part of the information provided to the legislature. Is that accurate?
I
Well,
don't think we should
I-
provide them the spreadsheet personally, but
I
go
would
ahead.
suggest that you do want to have a fairly detailed line item of all of the one-time funding request items that we are looking to draw down from the $9 million that we have remaining in the allocation.
Right.
I think that's going to be essential. So
I think we had talked about that previously. Yes.
right,
And
right. So I think that's here, and I think that's good, and I think you need that that going through there. I also think we, I think you, if we're going to propose the governance board, and it sounds like we are from yesterday's meeting, I think you also have to have that budget in here as well. And again, this is in here. So
it's in there, right?
I think you are going to have to show them most of this anyway.
I think there was some discussion last time about should we map this out so that it shows spending all of the assumed $9 million here.
Yes.
Because right now it shows over 4 million left over after these recommendations.
Well, I have a thought. So one of the we've been kicking this around a little bit and thinking through what our objectives are, and I think we're well on the way to meeting the objectives that were given to us by the Act. But one that we've sort of lost sight of in the mix is the whole equity conversation. So how do we address the notion that there are still a number of communities that are not spending any money on dispatch, and a number of communities that are spending a lot of money on dispatch? So here's what I would recommend. First of all, I would recommend that we bring forward the hard item requests that we've already worked out, so the CAD and whatever other, standards and, the things are going to cost a one-time fee, the actual tangible items. I think at the same time, we bring forward a formula, and I know we've discussed a number of them in previous meetings, that with whatever calculus that we have to come up and say, this is what we think would be fair for those communities that are not paying for dispatch now through the state police, at least, because I think those are the ones that we can get our hands around.
Right.
And we should use that formula to charge them a future fee. Now, I don't think we should do it right away. I think we could say, as Mike will let us know, that you can't just say to a town, hey, we're going to give you this big charge next year without proper planning. But I think what we could do is say, we anticipate this to go into effect in, you tell me how many years it makes sense, in 3 years, in 5 years, and take the remaining budget line from that $9 million and say, we are going to make this a soft landing. So for the next 3 years, we're going to cover those fees for towns to give them an opportunity to spool up, to transition from zero to whatever we're going to ask them to do. And this will give us an opportunity to go forward. Now, some of the communities, like the ones that are paying for it, will say, well, what do we get out of this? And what we will be able to say to them is, we're going to pay for, and continue to pay for, by the way, a CAD system, a governance structure, mapping, all of the other tangible items that we've already previously discussed. And those will continue to be something that they can benefit from going forward. And with those fees, we can offset the ongoing costs that are incurred. So for example, I think you mentioned, Dom and Rick, that the CAD was going to be about $50,000 a year. So we would use those fees to offset that. So whatever we're going to pay for, that those other agencies have all the right in the world to use, as long as they're meeting the standards and following the principles of the governance,
Right.
they will have continued access to. And then we can make a presentation to the legislature and say, hey, look, we've resolved this equity piece. So we're bringing this back to normal. We're giving everybody a soft landing, and we're bringing great benefit to the system because we're improving the infrastructure. We're adding a CAD, we're adding standards, and whatever the other elements are. That's what I was thinking anyway.
So kind of like an ease, like what you're saying is kind of like a set of costs that eases, or a stipend that eases the man overtime, right?
Correct.
Over a period. And maybe first year it's 50% stipend or 75%
Yeah,
stipend,
but
and then 50
sure.
and then 25
Yeah.
or something.
I would
like
even
that.
say maybe the first year is free, and we just say, look,
Yeah.
we're acknowledging that this is hard to do. We've got a little bit of extra money that we can soften the blow with, and you're right. Then so year 1 is 0, year 2 is 50%, year 3 is, or what, I don't know how that would ordinarily be done, but I'm sure we could come up with some kind of formula so that city managers across the spectrum here can say, okay, well, we got a little time to work this out,
Yeah.
and we can make a plan.
Yeah.
I
like that.
I like that idea. It makes sense. To
I
go
like it too.
along, to
And-
go along with that, I could see that maybe if the costs that we're anticipating gathering from the towns supports would we be looking at that money also supporting the governance structure? And for example, if just let me finish a minute,
Yeah.
Dan. If we say it's going to take 3 years to ramp up to where the towns would be paying their full allotment based on whatever formula we come up with, do we have money in this budget to cover the governance structure for those 3 years? And then beyond that, the fees from the towns would support the governance structure.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it would depend upon some math that we're going to have to do here.
All right.
I'll just say, I'll say 2 things about that. One is, I think the more focus we put into positions and growing government, the more resistance we're going to get from the 5th floor. And that's been a consistent position across sort of all government, for years now. So I would just be prepared for that. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to ask for, but I think we should just be prepared for that.
But
think-
that concept would make the governance structure, it would have funding indefinitely without state allocation.
Well, right, but it's
coming from the town.
again, it's not that I disagree
Yeah.
with you, but I think it's going to be viewed as we're growing government, we're adding,
Okay,
anyway.
yeah,
But so I'm not saying no, I'm just saying I think we should be conscious of that.
I see where you're coming from, but that's
The other argument that you could make, so again, depending upon how the math works out, right? So I don't know what the balance sheet's going to look like as we contemplate this. But the other notion you could make an argument for is to say, we're going to take that revenue and use it to build the infrastructure. So to say, if there's money left over, if there's extra money, and you can project this over a series of years, to say that this isn't going to be for funding new dispatch centers or things like that, but it is going to be used for improving the overall system as determined by that governance board.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
So if the 5th floor says, geez, I don't want to use this for positions, and you go, okay, we still have a glut of money here that we can use to improve the overall infrastructure. Because again, I think what we have to be careful about is saying, all that money's just going to DPS so that they can, pay their dispatchers. Well, I'd like to say that's true. What I really want to do is be able to say, no, the benefit you get from supporting this Burlington and, Keene, New Hampshire, and all this is you get access to standardized stuff like the CAD, and an improving infrastructure over time.
I think it's a creative approach.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Right.
give you some. I think we should look at some numbers because we're prepared to have this conversation. Dom, if you could go to slide 40, it's Williston and Westminster dispatched towns and agencies.
Okay.
So while you're going there, I think, Dan, you had mentioned in particular, the towns that are getting services for free from the state police. I think that's important that we get those, identify those and get some moving towards rectifying that problem. But it also helps with what you're proposing also by developing this formula. We have, for example, we have Shelburne, who told us that they've been undercharging for years and left themselves with $1 million hole. And we have other communities complaining about, they think they're being overcharged, particularly by some of the New Hampshire centers. It gives them, once we've established this formula, it gives them somewhere to start with some negotiations, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Between the customer towns and the providing towns.
I think the other thing that it does is make people take a serious look at some of the organic changes that we're talking about, right? To say, geez, we can't do that on our own. It may very well lead to them saying, well, maybe we could combine with these other folks over here and do it cheaper.
Right.
So the results of the survey, we have 2 surveys out there, and we're getting responses to both of those, and they theoretically close the end of this week, tomorrow. But we've seen some interesting ideas on consolidation. There's a couple of hell no's, and there's others said, yeah, I'd be interested in it, and so I could share that with you. But in support of what this conversation we're having, we went through the Williston and Westminster dispatch towns and agencies, and so I think when you see the numbers, it's really it's you could develop some additional insight. So let's go to the next slide, please. So let's start with Westminster. So what we did was we went through the list that we have of all of the towns and the law enforcement, fire, and emergency medical services towns are dispatched. And so at Westminster, 103 towns are dispatched by the Westminster PSAT. And of those 103 towns, 179 agencies are dispatched. And so this is the breakdown. I apologize for how small it is, but I want to get it all. I want to get it all in one slide. And so, you could see that this is pretty significant. I mean, we got 179 agencies being dispatched out of for 103 towns, 179 agencies being dispatched out of Westminster. So, in addition, I think to the conversation that Dan, just fostered, this formula should apply to all centers, because right now we've got a lot of competition going on, and
Right.
there's a price elasticity here where if I can get a better deal over there, I'm going there. And of course, sometimes they don't really know they even have radio service. So, but anyway, this is the list for Westminster. So,
Paul, let me ask you. So I think it's going to be difficult for us to say to another organization that's not state controlled, you have to charge this fee, right? So it's going to be hard for us to say Keene, New Hampshire.
Agreed.
However, does it make sense for us to explore the notion of saying, if you would like access to our state-funded CAD system, this is a contingency upon that, so in other words, if you want to play in our sandbox and use our CAD and use our protocols and stuff that we're paying for on an ongoing basis, you have to agree to these fees.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I agree. I don't think we can tell them what they can charge. I was just thinking that for those, some Vermont communities that kind of feel like they're held over a barrel by an out-of-state dispatch center, it gives them at least some place to start negotiating.
Yep.
And like you said, if they want to take advantage of what we're offering for technology, then yeah.
And by the
gives us
way,
some
at
control.
the same time, the other interesting element of this is at the same time, if we were able to lay this out on a per town basis, what's going to happen next is all these towns are going to throw their arms up in the air and say, "This is too much. We can't afford it. We don't want to do this." Right. And I think we may hear from the VLCT, all that kind of thing. So, but it also gives us a very clean framework to say to the legislature, okay, if you want it to be free, this is how much it costs.
Right.
Can you go to the next slide too, please, Don? So here's Williston. Same process, went through all of the towns and the dispatch. So Williston, 112 towns, 118 agencies. And in this case here, Williston dispatches for a lot of PDs, where Westminster dispatches for all agencies. But in this situation here, I got 112 towns and 118 agencies. And so the total of the two is 215 towns, 297 agencies. And so these are the ones we're talking about that we would have to apply a fee to.
And just to be clear, to make sure we all understand this. So the 215 towns means that they're either Westminster or Williston dispatches for at least one agency in 215 towns.
Right.
And in some towns, they dispatch for multiple agencies, meaning maybe law enforcement and fire, eventually EMS. That's where the 297 comes in.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
But I'm still having a hard time agreeing with those numbers. The towns, yes. The agencies.
Is that like dog catchers and, like, is that, or is it just,
Well, like,
is this just first response agencies?
Well, like, for example,
that would be.
I'm looking at the column on the right here where it lists Irisburg, Jay, Lewis, Morgan. And for law enforcement, it lists Williston. That's the state police in Williston. Are you counting each one of those Williston entries as a separate agency?
Well, you bring up a good point. So
Yeah.
It could be that those towns have an agreement that the state police are their law enforcement.
Well, it's not an agreement. It's just any town that doesn't have a police department, the state police is their default law enforcement agency.
Yeah, that's not didn't consider that
You're
in,
right.
but that I didn't have that data, but that's
Okay.
but that's I mean maybe
That
Chris
would
can
factor
provide that
in here.
information.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, like Rutland over on the left. Okay, we know we come out of Westminster, I think, right, most of the time.
And
right?
Chris has his hand up after Mike's done.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. So
No,
for
that's
Rutland,
fine. Go ahead.
Rutland, Westminster, or whoever, Williston, whoever the 911 calls, the PSAP calls coming in from, you guys will dispatch to regional ambulance. And I said you guys, sorry, DPS. DPS will dispatch for regional ambulance, and they'll dispatch for one other agency, but I think PD in the sheriff's department. I think PD and fire. We take the call from the PSAP at that point and handle it. So in Rutland, there's actually two agencies that use it and two agencies that don't. Right? I think so. So that data is important to some degree. I don't know how granular we can get.
Thanks.
Chris.
Mike.
Chris.
Yeah, Chris, please add
Chris,
some
go ahead.
insight.
Yeah, no, I think you all kind of hit it on the head, and I'm sorry, I was going to interject earlier, but I'm just like, let me let everybody play out. But I think you all hit it on the head that these numbers are definitely high, and to the earlier point, a lot of these are just areas that VSP covers patrol for those areas. They don't have their own fees, et cetera.
Right.
So the real number, when I say the real numbers, like if we look at Williston, in addition to VSP and state agencies other state agencies that we dispatch for basically 13 additional, departments, if you will, right? So the number is truly like 13. And in Westminster, we go about 53 or so additional agencies in addition to state agencies that we dispatch for. So that just gives you a little bit of better perspective. I think this is just, again, this list is showing all the towns that VSP is responsible for patrolling and law enforcement.
Correct.
You
Thanks.
guys hit it all.
That's helpful, Chris. But I think what's important here, and I think what we're trying to show is that these towns do not pay for law enforcement dispatch. That's what we're trying to show here, Rick, right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
That also hits it on the head, right?
Yeah.
These are all areas that VSP is covering, but again, we're not receiving any monetary benefit for the service.
Exactly.
So, exactly.
The other thing that I was going to bring up is, so, right now we're getting nothing for this. So getting anything for this is going to be an improvement towards equity. And as we do this calculus and we figure out this formula, we may want to have an eye to how do we keep this a manageable number for a community? And, I would trust a guy like Mike to help us with that a little bit, so that it's not just an outrageous number based upon a relatively arbitrary formula that we come up with, but rather to say, hey, look, we want to, the vision for this is to build equity in the system over time. And this is the starting point. And we will continue to examine this cost over time. We don't have to fully maximize it in the first iteration of this, is I guess what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would be happy to, help think through that a little bit. I'll give you just an example. So you see if you go, you don't have to go back to the previous slide, but we spent about $400,000 on staffing and phone lines for our dispatch, right? So it doesn't necessarily, probably don't include software in that. And I know we're on same systems, but that's for the city of Rutland. So if the city of Rutland stopped dispatching all of a sudden tomorrow, we know that there's room in the budget to be able to afford to cover that. On the flip side, though, when you talk to these communities that have a regional planning commission and a regional this and and they all have to pay dues, when they go from paying like $1,000 a year to paying per capita or paying per whatever, they have a very hard time adjusting to those numbers most times.
That's exactly right. It's exactly
right. Because it's unpredictable. Well, it was unpredicted. So that's, again, that staged thing, Dan, that you were talking about is a really good idea. But also, even in their long-term vision, they may have a bit of a struggle thinking about this. So we just have to be cognizant of it.
Yeah. And that's been my hesitation on the whole, we're going to do this on a per incident kind of movement, because again, when we get out to the towns and the gores, they're going to say, I only use this 30 times a year. So that means I should pay $15 a year for dispatching, right? And, that's truly their vision right now is, we only use it a couple times a year. We shouldn't have to pay anything for it. I think there has to be some notion of you're paying for the 24-hour service, and therefore there's a base rate here, and then we adjust it based upon some of the other incidentals, some of the other rates that we can get into. But again, I think we have to have a notion of how do we keep this manageable so that it's not uniformly rejected by every user.
Right. So along that line, I'll give you an example. It's not dispatch related, but it's water related. So I live in Barrytown, and sometimes our water system is not enough to supply the town. So we have a connection to the Barry City water system. They charge us a base rate. They call it readiness to serve. They charge us a base rate just for the privilege of being connected to their water system, whether we use it or not. And then if we actually open the spigot and draw water down, then they send us a separate bill for what we actually draw.
There you go. Something like that makes a lot of sense. Because we've had these conversations in EMS with like the Canaans of the world and places like that. And their notion right now is we have no tax base, we have no need for the system, but we can't just not have 911. So what they're saying to us right now is, what do you want us to do about that? I go, I don't know what I want you to do. I don't want you to do anything about that. But their notion is we should have to pay nothing for this. So if we come in and say you're gonna have to pay a lot for this, then that's just going to cause hate and discontent. What I think we should say is we want to approach this in a very equitable way. We're not trying to break the bank or bust the budget of anybody, but we do want to make sure that everybody's paying at least a little bit towards the common good. And I do also think that it will be important. I like the idea of how do we leverage this to keep costs down for outside agencies if we can. I'm not sure we can, but if we can,
Right.
to say, how do we make sure that if you're getting the benefit of shared systems and shared infrastructure, Valcor, for example, that you're not overcharging people beyond what we think is a reasonable ask. Now, by the way, you can do that, but you just can't share our stuff.
Right. And I don't think, like, just pick a town here, like look at on the left column near the top there, Glover, for example, where it shows Williston all the way across for all three disciplines. I don't think it's ever been the position of DPS that Glover should pay for police dispatching because it's troopers that are responding. I don't think they're going to ask the town to pay the state police to dispatch their own troopers to the town. However, they should be paying for dispatch of their fire department and their ambulance.
Well, I would take it a step further. I would say like they should be paying a base rate, right?
Right.
And that base rate enables them to be dispatched, period. And then we start looking at some of those other incidentals, right?
Yeah.
So Glover's population, 1,096.
Right.
Can we, Dom, if you don't mind, let's continue this conversation. Go to the next slide, Dom. So, because, we really have two, this is a key element of our funding and cost sharing modeling. The next slide goes over through some of the survey finding and some options for the model. Because, we started modeling and then it's like, there are too many options, and I didn't want to model. We could develop a model based on anything we agree to here, but we had started to build a model. But I'm like, well, this doesn't reflect what the working group's thoughts are. So the next slide goes through some little bit more detail. We received on the table to the left is information that we received in survey. So these are figures that were provided to us via the Vermont League of Cities and Towns surveys. And as I mentioned during the task force meeting yesterday, these really came from town managers, select board, chiefs of police, and others. And so you'll see there are two numbers there for Shelburne, because two different people provided the number. The one on the bottom was provided by the town manager. The one on the top was provided by a select board member. So I think the one on the bottom is a more accurate number.
Yes.
And some of these don't have any, but you could see, I just did as I said, it's easier to do based on per pop. And you could see that the numbers vary considerably based on, population and the cost per population. Of course, that's not the formula that they all use, but these were numbers. And of course, some of these, I think, when Woodstock gives us a number of 500,000, I have to question the validity of those numbers. But these are the numbers that were provided. So there is a potential risk that some of these numbers are not right, but let's assume for the sake of analysis that they are correct or they're within a good region. And you could see just looking at population, what happens, what the costs are. Numbers, wherever you see a line, someone said 0. And where there isn't a line, the field was empty. They didn't put a 0 or they didn't put anything in. So Linden and Rupert didn't provide. It was blank. So in Barton Village and in Rochester, they put a 0. But this is a pretty large spread of what the costs are per population. So when we look at a dispatch formula option, I'm listing here both what was stated by the respondents to the survey. It should be based on population. It could be call volume. Shelburne says they base theirs on call volume. One said that should be the grand list. So population plus call volume on an annual basis, population plus call volume on a multi-year averaging, population plus call volume plus grand list, population number of calls with high density areas, population poverty levels plus grand risk plus call volume plus amount of social services provided, which I don't quite understand what that means. But these are the lists that were provided by the responders to the survey. And so we had not, as a group, this one here, T equals B times G plus R. This was the one that, was a legislative offering that never made it to the finish line. There are also some comments said free to towns with populations less than 2,500, which, as Ron pointed out, is a lot, as most of the state. And someone put in there, do not penalize towns that have interstate highways because, they may have, there's incidents on the interstates and they're coming to their dispatch center and they don't think they should be penalized. And then there was one commenter that said dispatching should be a free service that the state pays for based on our tax base. So I just put them in because they were interesting. But if we develop a formula here, we can model a formula. But what do we wait? What is the right approach? And I like this two-stage. You pay a fee and then formula based. But what do we think is a reasonable formula? We could take multiple one and we can run them, but I didn't want to. We didn't want to try to provide you with any of that today because there are just too many options.
I don't know, and I don't know that I have the expertise to say how to do this the right way. I like the notion. The one that is sort of catching my attention is the T equals B times G. It seems, I don't know, seems nerdy enough that it's right to me. I mean,
Us nerds take offense to that, Dan.
Well, I'm one of you, so I'm there. But what I would say is, I think that, as I've mentioned, I don't think it can necessarily only be calculated by number of calls because you're all of a sudden gonna, knock out all those low call volume places that are, still in need of dispatch services. But I do like the notion that we take a consideration of population. I guess I don't feel qualified to answer that question.
Well, that one's easier to model because there's nothing to model. But yeah, I mean, yes, it's complicated.
That formula does have the base fee. It has two components to it. One of it's based on a base fee, and then another one's based on call volume.
Yeah. But what is the base fee? That's got to be a number. Calculate it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. B equals statewide base fee. Right. That's something.
Well, that I think we could come up with. We say, I think that's again, I'm not an expert here, but we know that there's how many towns that are not paying for dispatch altogether. And then we know the end that we're trying to solve for is how much does it cost to keep all these functions going on an annual basis after the $9 million is spent. I would say take that number and then divide it by the number of towns that aren't paying anything, and there's your base fee. Now, if that's a huge number, then you chop it in half or something like that. But I think that at least gets you started with something.
Yeah, it's going to have to be an iterative process where we determine what the base fee needs to be.
Right. I think you'll have to essentially pick some numbers out of the air initially and run some modeling and see where it comes out. And if it doesn't generate quite enough money, then bump it up a little and run it again.
Yeah, I agree.
So can you say that formula one more time? I mean, we can model it, but I just want to be sure that I fully understand it.
Who are you asking that to, Rick?
You, Dan. It's you.
Oh, I don't have one in my head. I like the T equals B times G plus R times C. That's kind of where my eye goes to. I think what I would do if you want to figure out what the base is, I would
Mhm.
take the number we're trying to solve for is how much it costs to maintain all of the things that we're asking for in one-time fees on an annual basis. In other words, the CAD, the mapping stuff, the protocols, the standard things that have an annual dollar fee. So I'd figure out what that is on an annual basis, and then I would divide it by the number of towns that don't pay anything at all. So that means at a base, you've covered your nut for what it costs every year just to keep stuff moving forward. And then you take all the rest of the stuff and you add it on top of that to then look to how do we make system improvements? How do we think about infrastructure changes, all that kind of stuff? The additional fees are what makes the system better. The base fee is just simply what keeps the lights on.
I got a question, yeah, Dan. What the base fee divided by the number of towns that don't pay anything? Why wouldn't it be just the total number of towns? Because wouldn't we want to equalize it?
Well, because Burlington's going to say we're already paying for our dispatch. Why would we
Right,
pay?
and Rutland would probably say it's something similar, right? And again, yeah.
We're aiming for equity. Now, you could say to Rutland and Burlington, for example, if you're charging any other towns for dispatch, you have to use this formula to arrive at your fee.
Okay.
But I think if a dispatch center is already paying, that's not what we're aiming. We're not aiming. We're aiming for equity here, not to make everybody pay.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if you say everybody's going to pay, they're going to oppose it, and we're dead in the water before we start. We got to get the Rutlands and the Burlingtons to say, yeah, we don't care, right? Because we're going to have a hard enough time with the Castletons and the Richmonds and the Williamstowns. They're the ones who are going to say, we can't afford this. And we go, our argument to them is, you're paying nothing. We're not asking you to pay everything. We're just asking you to pay a share, and it's going to be based upon, your size and volume and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to benefit. You're going to continue to benefit in the long term by the improvements that we make to the system.
I can convince Rutland.
But you're already paying.
Well, it comes out of our budget. Figure it out, Rick. So what's the question?
We begin modeling this today.
Say that again.
No, you got it.
I was going to say, so what's the question? Do we need to refine this? Is this, again, I'm trying to remember, because Dan made some good suggestions of what we should and shouldn't dictate to the legislature. And I'm just want to make sure we aren't, I think we wanted to give them options, right? And this is one of them. And if we're going to give them this option, is this as refined as we need it to be, or do we need to refine it more?
I think we need to refine it. I think we need to come up with some actual formula here. Because they're going to ask us what the base rate is and that kind of stuff. But I think it's within our reach here. And if we propose this model now, by the way, I think we should also, in addition to this, say, here's how some other states have funded bigger and better.
Yes.
I don't think we should be limiting it to this, but I think this is an elegant way to say we're asking to spend this money, but if you can't give us the ongoing funding, here's a way to do it without having to make broad sweeping changes.
without having gone through the effort of calculating, I got a feeling that it's not going to be a lot of money because the majority of the towns that aren't paying are pretty small. They seem to be smaller
Yeah.
towns. All the
But they are.
largest towns have their own centers.
Oh, all the better, right? Because if we can present them if we can present them a number and say, look, this isn't very much money. All we're asking for is a share. You know what I mean? Like that makes it hard for them to push back too hard.
And that share is, I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this right. That share is like, so let's say, and I know I got to be careful here to some degree, but let's say Rutland says, okay, we will be happy to be one of these regional dispatch centers, follow the rules, and support other towns, which we don't right now, right? That share of those towns paying is to help supplement the cost of us doing that, whether that's adding additional dispatchers or whatever that happens to be, plus the administration of this organization. We're calculating
Yeah,
both
no.
of those things in there, right?
No,
or are we not?
At least in my head, this would be to supplement the cost of the ongoing cost of the CAD and theoretically the governance and theoretically any of the one-time asks that we have. So
Doesn't count staffing, doesn't
it
count.
doesn't count staffing or any of that kind of stuff. Because again, and by the way, neither am I asking for this for DPS, right? So I'm not asking, this is not going to go into the pockets of the existing dispatch centers other than to pay for systems like CAD and stuff like that. Now, you could say, I'm going to stop paying for whatever CAD I'm using that's different than what we're proposing here and recoup costs that way, right? So if you're using a different CAD system or, so you could make an argument that we're giving you something here, but no, this is not to say we're going to get paid to do this. I mean, unless you want it to be that, and then I think it's a different conversation.
Well, but then the question to me, and now I'll take Rutland out of the equation, is what's the incentive for people to say we will take on additional load and take that off of DPS?
Yeah, there's no
Right?
incentive, right? There's no incentive other than the fact that we were tasked to create an equitable system. Right.
Right.
And to say the incentive is if you don't, DPS is going to have to look at dropping you because we can't continue to pay for everything for free.
Right. That's the small towns.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm saying, what's the incentive for those other organizations that say we can take on the regional dispatch role to actually take that on?
Oh,
right?
Okay. So
I see.
So
because right now, if we're trying to remove
ones,
this weight from DPS,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a great question. How could we? That's a really good angle to think about. Is how could we leverage that into this equation?
Right. Because again, I mean, our dispatchers. I don't want to. Again, I can use Rutland as an example because I get to see it. Our dispatchers. We usually have one on. We don't have that much of a call load, maybe two on the busiest times a day. But if we needed to staff up because we were going to start, if Rutland said, hey, we are willing to cover Rutland Town, West Rutland, all of Rutland County as a whole, let's just say. We need to increase staff. It'd be great to have all the other things covered. But we would also probably want to, and like you said, the incentive may be, okay, we don't have to pay for CAD anymore. Cool. And that's enough to cover some of the cost, right? That we'll say, okay, we'll dispatch for us and others. But it's the and others. And how do we, because if we do want to end up with like 6 or 7 regional dispatch centers, we need to cover those costs.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I wonder if there isn't a way to think about this in terms of that, to say, okay, so part of that base fee, I'm spitballing here and I need smarter people than me to help me think this through. But what if we said, part of that base fee, statewide base fee is for CAD and the one-time items. What if we also said that another, like that's base fee 1 and base fee 2 is like some kind of a regional dispatch fee. Now, again, we'd have to adjust the numbers. And then we could say, if you had that regional dispatch fee integrated into this formula, that an agency that is willing to accept a new town would have access to that regional dispatch fee.
They would get the regional dispatch fee.
I like that. That's
Right.
super simple. And for
So you
every
say-
town,
Yeah, don't do anything. You don't have to, but if you're willing to regionalize and take on new clients, that money would go directly to offset your costs.
that's in for us. So that in the municipal world, that additional non-tax revenue is so important to being able to say yes to new things,
Okay.
right? That's so important to be able to say, oh, so for every additional, maybe the dispatch fee has a point system, right? Maybe for a Pulteney, since it's such a small town, it's 0.3 of a dispatch fee or whatever, and maybe for Castleton it's 0.9 because they're whatever it is. I'm picking random numbers, but and that can be based on the call volume.
Yeah,
or the
right.
Traditional call.
There you
volume.
go.
But that allows someone like a Rutland or Rutland sheriffs or whoever wants to do it to say, okay, we'll happily dispatch for that town. Now, our guidance and our governance should say, well, 2 different dispatch centers shouldn't be dispatching for side-by-side towns. There's got to be some guidelines around how you pick and choose. But I think from a funding model and incentivization standpoint, additional non-tax revenue is going to be critical for these organizations to take on the incentive of dispatching for others.
I like that.
But that revenue isn't going to be there for the first year or two if we're phasing in the fees.
Well, it will be
Through
if
Dan's
if we utilize the remainder of that
Yes.
$9 million.
That's right,
So
$9 million.
if we
Yep.
put, let's say we put $4 million aside and say, again, this is all phony math because I don't know what the numbers are, right? But let's say we got $4 million. You can say that will be there in the first year in anticipation of revenue to come later.
Yep.
That's right.
So if I may add a couple underlying considerations. Regionalization requires a reliable land mobile radio network. So you can't just join any entity. You can't just move from here to there without ensuring that you have radio coverage. And radio coverage is not free. And radio coverage is not very reliable. And when we do move from, if a town moves from regionalizes from center A to center B, again, we have some towns because PD and fire and EMS are dispatched by others. If they all have to go, they're right now they probably pay something different on different formulas. I don't know the answer to that, but there isn't any standard formula. So in regionalization, you've got to have reliable radio coverage, period. And by doing this regionalization, what we're talking about, you're also creating, another competitive layer here, because if Rutland wants to, provide services to other towns, the towns that they're already being dispatched for, those dispatch centers are going to have a shortfall in revenue. And so, I don't know if we're solving a problem or just adding more to it. So, but the concept of regionalization is, I think is, more complicated than what we might be thinking, because as we already know, the dispatch centers already compete for the service and the business of their towns and so that's an ongoing, that's a given, that happens, and we're trying to, and people are paying different rates, and that's why they're moving, and so I mean, it's complicated. As Dan just said earlier, we need someone smarter than maybe all of us to figure this out. If we can if we can come up with a few models, we can model them to see how they turn out. But I don't want to lose sight that we need radio, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Well, I mean, if we could agree on some modeling approach, Dom and I can take on, putting together some models that we could share with you. We want to take the T equals B times G plus R times C. We can model that, and we can come up with some justification on what fees a statewide base fee is and others. I mean, we can come up with a rationale behind how we've achieved those. We already have what Dan has proposed earlier. When I said earlier that I thought these towns are small, I was thinking that, I don't think they're going to raise enough capital. We would raise enough capital from them to pay for our annual cost of the task force recommendations. I don't know the answer to that yet, but we can, we need to go ahead and model it to see
Yeah,
what
you gotta
those
model it
fees
out.
are. We got to
Right.
model it.
Yeah, and if you can add in that sort of dispatch coverage fee, right? Like
Yeah, there's like
Dan was talking.
B1 and B2 is kind of like the
Yep.
way I would like
I
to
like
think about
that.
it.
Exactly. And then, yeah, that would be great to see that. And we can work it out. Maybe have a couple of test examples, for us to run through, like with some
Yeah.
real data.
Well, we could bring the spreadsheet and then we can create it such that, we can massage it real time during a meeting, so
Right.
we'll go through the spreadsheet. So that we say, okay, well, we changed this, we changed that, here's what happens, because we'll have to do a number of iterations that way anyway. And so that'll be, that's how it'd have to work. So, but again, there's other considerations. There's no free lunch. And the commenter who said, don't penalize towns with interstate highways. Well, it is what it is. So,
Yeah, that is a big concern for those
yeah,
towns
no,
that
it's
have an interstate. That interstate drives a huge amount of responses for emergency services, unfortunately, that the towns have no control over.
I thought it was a very interesting point of view that was put up there.
Well, but that's the reason why we're not doing this solely based upon volume, solely based upon population. That there's a formula here, and I think that's how we make it equal for everybody.
Okay. Paul, you provided us the language of this legislation. Did the document that you provided also include the names of the legislators who had proposed it? Be interesting to understand what they were thinking about these numbers instead of be good to get their insight. It's not that old.
Yeah, I think it was a committee bill. I think it was the Senate Committee on Government Operations. And specifically, I think it was Senator Hardy from Addison County that came up with this proposed formula. I don't know that for a fact, but before she got removed from chairpersonship of that committee, she was really the one kind of driving this.
We've had a couple of meetings with her. Barb knows her quite well. Maybe we could have a conversation with her about it. Maybe she remembers something that might be a benefit to us. I don't know if it's worth seeing if we could get her on a call. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, my guess is she didn't create it. My guess is that there was a staff
Well,
member,
yeah.
committee liaisons.
Somebody at her direction. Yeah.
All right, so I think
Maria Royal was the person in legislative council that was, I think, kind of assigned to this.
However, I think it's worth asking.
Yeah. Maria Royal, right? Royal.
Royle. She's one of I think she's an attorney. She works for legislative council. She's one of the bill drafters. If the legislator goes to leg council and says, draft me up a bill that accomplishes X, Y, and Z, she's one of the people that does that. I think I'm sure Senator Hardy, I mean, she was very involved in this back when she was chair of the committee. I don't know if she's feeling like her wings were clipped enough that she wouldn't want to talk to you about it, or if she wouldn't appreciate the call. I'm not sure.
All right, if it's okay with you, gentlemen, what if we ask Barb? Barb seems to know her well. I mean, you all may know her well too. To reach out to her to set up a call.
Barb testified in her committee many times. when she was chair of government ops.
Yeah, and
We
she's
could
good people too. I feel like she'd help you.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. So again, this is a moving target and we've got some options here. So Dom and I will work on this, but Dom, if we could, I think, we've got a couple more minutes before we go to shut down, and I wanted to go to slide 39, which is, just scroll up. You don't have to change it. Scroll up 4 slides. Yep, 5 slides right there. All right. So, and you're going to have to, this one is going to, yeah, I can read the difference here. All right. So what you asked for, Dan, was, again, some options. This is these are potential options that we could, say, hey, we've thought about this. Here's a few options, and I've also done some of this based on state bonds. Obviously, many states sell bonds to fund land mobile radio networks. I got a number of those that do that, and that's I could list a number of them, North Dakota and others who have done this, and they do that for these high ticket items. There's also the state local budget. We got some Act 78 funds that we're going to use, maybe future state funds, assess fees for non-paying dispatch towns, which we've kind of talked about. I'm going back to the right of way because Paul and his working group have suggested right of way, and the state does charge right of ways. It's managed by the Department of Transportation. I don't know what we have there. If there's any more fees that could be added. And again, I know that assessing fees is really not the cup of tea for the legislature.
I didn't think they were. I mean, it's in statute that they can, but I didn't think they ever actually started collecting that right of way fee.
I researched it, but I couldn't find an answer to that. It does say in statute they can fee, so maybe there's someone in transportation we could ask. I think put that on our list to ask somebody. The same thing was with the utility full access fee. That was another good recommendation that your working group had. I don't know where to look for that, but I couldn't find anything directly who we would speak to about that. Again, state radio tower access fees. We don't lease out our towers, and we don't lease out towers, so I don't know if there's any room or if there's any appetite with that, but multiple states and local municipalities leverage site access rental fees. That's there's not we've got between ourselves and other state utility agencies. There's there's a number of towers and maybe carriers would want access to them. Went through the rental car fee, the tourist levy, not on in-state rentals like insurance rentals. It would be, this is a fee on tourism. This is a tourism fee. Again, similar on an airport tourism fee. The cannabis tax we talked about. They had revenue this should be 2024 revenue, not 2025, of 19.5 million. If we could get 10% of that, that's 2 million. Motor vehicle and other violations fee. The state of Indiana, their legislature added a $10 fee for every license and motor vehicle registration. So that's what they've done, and they use that money to build and maintain their land mobile radio network. There's special taxes, and this is where when you see it this way. So I'll read those to you. Televate is doing work for Yakima County. That one's not on there. That's the bullet below this one that you can't see. But Yakima County, authorized a special purpose local option sales tax. And in 2024, their citizens voted to raise the sales tax by 0.25%, and they to raise $40 million for their radio network. The Whitfield County, Georgia voters did they also raised their taxes. They voted to raise their taxes, and they're collected 63.6 million to fund and operate their radio network. So there have been approved special legislations out there, and I just put this together because the thought was, well, maybe we could just provide the legislature some thoughts, ideas that they probably have thought of these, and they might reject all of them, but I don't know what you want to do with this, but I can give you some more examples of what states are doing, but these are some examples of what states are doing now. And the Universal Service Fund up here, the third bullet down, we talked about this. We're at 72 cents. Massachusetts is charging that's not $165. I forgot they're charging. I'm gonna fix it real. I just fixed it real time. But anyway, yeah. I mean, we in Vermont, your Universal Service Fund, because you call it that, you're able to use it on, and I think it funds 4 or 5 different initiatives. Other states, don't take that approach. Vermont is one of the only states that I'm familiar with that doesn't have a 911 fee. But anyway, that. Yeah, I changed it while you were in the. I have it up on my other screen.
Okay.
Anyway,
now it's fixed.
Yeah, it's fixed. So, I don't know what we want to do for this, and whether or not that we think that our recommendation would be that we would provide a list of potential funding options and some examples of where they're used, and if so, I want to make sure that we agree to it so that we could provide it. We can go ahead and edit this down and make it available for presentation to the task force for their consideration once we get there.
Yeah, I don't think we have to do a whole lot with it. I think we just kind of say these are examples. These are examples of how other states have funded it.
Right. We're not recommending one over another. These are just These are some things to think about that other states have done.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. With that said, I think the only thing left to be, and we're not going to have time for it, was the slide 45. So if you just scroll down 7, you're going to get there. These are, this is kind of our final work. I mean, we need a dispatch fee model, recommendations on how to allocate the 9 remaining budget. And then, what do we do with the legislature, and do we do any outreach? Is there a role for others? I mean, Dan mentioned, maybe we should have some of Vermont's public safety leadership in there as well, because may not be enough, there's the might be some, we may be able to get better leverage when we bring public safety to the table. I mean, obviously the task force is made of that. Is there a role for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, any other advocates? And I don't think we really are out of time here. So, but I think, we could obviously one more session, we can go over the modeling of the fee structure, and then maybe just finalize, review this, and see what we want. I think we will have it under control.
Okay. Yeah, so we are at 2:25.
So Tom, you want to go back to the agenda page?
Absolutely.
We just got a few minutes left. Chris, did you have anything that you wanted to share with us today other than what you've already contributed?
No, that should be about it. I thank you for that.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Paul, before we move on, I just want to make a quick ask to see if there's anything that, I know time's getting tight. Is there anything that we can be doing, Rick and Dom, to accelerate this, or do we just need to keep meeting the way we're doing it? I'm not saying that we're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying, are we on track?
So I think the I think it's a good question. If you go to slide 4, Dom, slide down to the schedule. So Mike, we had looked at, excuse me, the possibility of presenting to the task force on one of 2 days. There's 2 more meetings left before we've got to get to the legislative ask. And that would be next Wednesday. And I don't think we're ready for next Wednesday unless we meet prior to that next Wednesday. And if not, we need to go to the 19th. So I think, Dom, it was the 11th or the 19th. So presentation
12th,
to the
right, 12th or the 19th.
Yeah, the 12th or the 19th. So I don't think we're going to make the 12th. And the only way we could do the 12th is if we met before the 12th. And then we went through the models and agreed to the models. If not, then our presentation to the task force for the recommendations would be on the 19th, and we'd have to meet at least one more time before then. I think we need at least one more meeting.
Holiday. Tuesday's a holiday, so that makes it even less likely.
Yeah. I think what we might be able to do, Dom and I'll get together today and tomorrow. I think we might, we could have a model to potentially review. But
Okay.
I don't want to make a commitment yet for that, because Dom and I have to get together and figure out how we work it into our schedule. But I can commit to, spending considerable time over the next couple of days on this.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right.
So,
Yeah.
so when do we want to meet next? Before we completely run out of time?
Sorry, Paul.
No, it's all right.
Looking at my calendar.
Like Dom said, Tuesday is a holiday, which is not a holiday for me, but I understand it probably is for the rest of you. Wednesday is the task force meeting. And Friday, unfortunately, unless we meet in the morning, I would not be available Friday.
I have Thursday afternoon free right now. I don't.
As do I.
Yeah, what about Thursday next week?
Yeah, I can make that work.
Great. Yeah, I'm good after 1. Sorry, after 2.
So-
My bad.
After 2, okay. So
So
just
should
like
we do
today,
it 2 o'clock or 3? But
Rick and Dom, are you
yeah,
available?
I'm available.
I'm available.
Okay. So yeah, sounds like next Thursday at 2 o'clock. And I will try to have some, I don't think it's not going to hold us. Whatever we get for additional budget information will be a plus, but it'll be an extra, I guess, whatever I can scrape up between now and then.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Dan, thanks for taking time from your event. I know you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
other
yeah.
responsibilities.
No problem. All right, guys, I got to run. See you later.
See you guys.
See you,
Take
everybody.
care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.